Coming up on this episode, I'm thinking about life in our bubbles. How we all kind of mosey about life in our own way, thinking that our lives are the be all and end all of the universe, but that couldn't be further from the truth. But it's interesting to think about and it's interesting to break down. So let's get into it. What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Perspective Chasers podcast, and I'm your host, John. On this episode, I'm thinking about how we all live life in our own little bubbles, kind of how this affects us going through life. Like, it's something I'm guilty of time and time again in my life, where it's like, even to close friends and things like that, I'll be so absorbed in my bubble. Years will go by and I haven't seen them. And then I see them, they've got like an extra kid or they're three relationships down the road from when I last spoke to them or whatever. Like, life changes in magnitudes for everybody. But because we all go around life in our own little bubbles thinking that everything that we do and everything that happens to us is the be all and end all of the universe, a lot of this other stuff passes us by. And like I say, like, I'm guilty of this time and time again in my own life. That's why I feel like I can talk about it, because I'm a repeat offender. And it's going to happen. There are pros to it. There's pros and cons to everything in life. Like, I like being in my bubble. I like focusing on John and seeing what I can do and where my life is going. And my life can be very hectic. So putting attention elsewhere, it takes away from me. And I'm very focused and very stubborn. So when I've got something in my sights, I don't want to look elsewhere. But again, that lets a lot of the rest of life pass me by. I go ages without seeing some friends. I'll go ages without doing this or that, but I'll have that constant focus throughout. And there are things that I miss, and there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish I can kind of go back and enjoy a bit more of that moment, or be a bit more present, or see people a bit more frequently, or check in with people more. But again, there's the flip side, where it's like I go to my bubble for a reason. And like there's reasons for everything, there's a reason to kind of put yourself in that bubble of solitary confinement in life. Just to focus on you and getting things done. Like, if you never take that time to sit with yourself, how are you ever going to know who you are? But if you never step out of that bubble, how are you ever going to share that with the world? So there is always going to be that kind of duality to things, where too little is bad, too much is bad. But a good balance of both, there's a happy medium. So being in your bubble is going to be the exact same thing. I try more so these days to kind of step out my bubble, see people, socialize more and everything else. And it does a world of good for me. It helps me mentally, it helps me physically, it helps me emotionally. But it helps me more than anything check in and register that I am actually living life and I'm enjoying life. I'm not just pushing through or getting dragged through life or whatever else. I'm actually experiencing along the way. Because as much as I want to get places in life and I'll use the bubble to get there, I don't want to get to the time where I'm 40, 50 years old and I've made no memories in the past 10, 20 years. Like, I don't want to be so driven or so focused on where I want to get to that I lose sight of the journey in itself. And it is something I'm guilty of, and it is a byproduct of being in that bubble. Like, even when I do long drives, so if I drive across country to see family or whatever else, it tends to be a good 4 or 5 hour drive. Now, if you was to add in stops and everything else, it could push up to 6 hours or more depending, and then you've got more chance of things going wrong with traffic and everything else. So I drive straight through more often than not and just power through, and it takes it out of me and it is a bit more grueling, blah 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 blah. But it works and it gets me there. But at the same time, the amount of things that I drive past on that way, in those 5 hours, I drive past theme parks, restaurants, parks, whatever it is. Like there's so many things that I just pass by on that journey because I'm so focused on where I've got to get to. And yeah, where I've got to get to might be far away, but it doesn't mean I can't enjoy the little things along the way in that. And maybe I will next time I take that drive actually be a bit more leisurely with it and stop along the way and see some things. Like I tell myself I'm going to do it every time, but then I'll pit myself against the clock and that focus comes in and I'm back in that bubble and it's like, well, I've got somewhere to go. Let's go. Block everything else out. And again, like it does let a lot of life pass you by. I say it all the time, but my daughter was probably the biggest kind of catalyst for me realizing that I was letting life pass me by. I used to be a workaholic and I worked 6 out of 7 days a week most weeks. Sometimes I'd even work 7 days and just work, 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 work. And I literally lived to work. It wasn't until my daughter came along that I actually stopped and I wanted to witness her grow and be with her throughout her life and make those memories, see her first steps, her first words, like all of those firsts I wanted to be there for. I didn't want to be at work or otherwise occupied. I wanted to be present. So she was probably the biggest thing that knocked me out of that bubble to get, but that, if anything, that kind of tells me how firmly I was stuck in it. Like I say, that I was heavily focused on just working and getting to where I wanted to be in life. I didn't care about anything else. I was in that bubble of titanium and she broke through it. And since that, I keep stepping out of my bubble. Not just with my daughter. Like, don't get me wrong, she will always be the first point of call to make me slow down in life. But after that is done, then it comes that question of, okay, what else can I step out of the bubble for? Does John need some time to himself? Do I need to take some time off of working, off of dad duty, off of all of the hecticness of life? And more often than not, the time is yes, because again, I'm in the habit of getting stuck in that bubble and blocking out the world and just focusing on what I've got to do. But there is a whole world out there to experience. So it's slow going, but stepping out of that bubble, like I say, like if I was 99% in my bubble before my daughter, she knocked me out of it, and since that loosened up the bubble, that put some cracks in it and allowed it for me to be easier to step out of it and everything else. And with time, it's got easier. Don't get me wrong, I still get stuck in those rabbit holes and those like tunnel vision moments and things like that. But I've always got a reason to come out of it now. But the thing is, not everybody has that reason. Not everybody has children. Not everybody has passions in their life. Not everybody has something that's going to be that catalyst to make them stop and smell the roses of life. So let me be the one to tell you, take a minute and just appreciate life beyond yourself. Because life is bountiful. The world is bountiful. The world is beautiful. But you have to look for it. It's out there if you see. And as always, the duality is there. The opposite is also true. The world can be miserable. The world can be dark. That is out there too if you look for it. But it's about where you look. And the thing is, you can look into the darkness. But if you're going to look into the darkness and do nothing about it, then all you're going to see is despair. But if you look into the darkness and you're willing to do something about it, you'll see a grain of hope. And then it's worth looking into the despair. But don't look in it to just sit in the pity of it and sit in the darkness. If you're going to look in it, do something about it. Same for the goodness of life. If you're going to look at it, enjoy it. Don't just let it pass you by. Don't view it through a camera lens and watch it back, or let people in your story see your life more vividly than you do. Like, seriously. Like, let that sit with you for a second. How many people probably have a more vivid story than they do have a memory? Where it's their social media holds more of their life than their brain does. Like, my God, I couldn't imagine having to go to a reference to be able to remember somebody important in my life or an important moment in my life. Like, there are so many times in which a camera is good, but being present is better. I remember at the time of my mum's funeral, everybody had their phones out recording the ceremony and this, that, and everything else. This is before we got to the chapel and everything. But everybody had their phones out, and they couldn't probably recall the moment if I sat with them now and asked them about it. But I can recall the horses. I can recall everything about the flower arrangement and my mum's coffin and all of those things because I witnessed them with my own eyes, not secondary through the lens of a camera and then the screen and then watching it back. Like, those memories are still vivid to me because I was present in them. I witnessed them. I didn't live it vicariously through a bit of technology. Now, how many people are letting important moments be experienced by technology opposed to themselves? Now, with what lays ahead of us in terms of AI and the future of technology, that seems like a dangerous habit to get in. So if you can, take the time to actually dial back and experience your life. Be present and experience it for yourself. Don't experience it for others. That's what social media and everything else tends to become a lot of people sharing aspects of their life to impress other people for the benefit of others, this, that, and everything else. That's not going to change your day-to-day of your life. Like, how many of these influencers that portray happiness and health and this, that, and everything else are completely unhealthy in their own life? They're struggling to get by in more ways than one, more often than not. Like, I think the world needs a big old dose of honesty where you say, like, yeah, sometimes it's good, sometimes life is good, sometimes life is bad. That's going to be true for everybody. Whether you're the king of a country, the president of a country, the binman of a country. Like, no matter your place in life, there's going to be moments that is going to feel good to you and there's going to feel bad to you. So be present in them. Like, if you're present in them, you can do something about them. If they're good, you can witness them and you can remember them and you can archive them, and that can add value to your life. If they're bad, you can do something about it and you can change your life for the better. Like, not only would you improve your life by changing a bad situation, but the feeling of accomplishment you would get from doing something and achieving something and improving something, that's going to help you tenfold more than that. But it comes down to taking the action. It comes down to looking there. And that comes back to stepping out of your bubble. Like, you're never going to see it if you're not looking. If you're only ever looking straight, you're not going to see what's behind you, what's to the left of you, what's to the right of you. If you spend your whole life with your head fixed straight ahead, thinking that's the direction I've got to go, you might miss your dream happiness, or whatever you want to contextualize it as, just off to the left of you. It could be 1 degree to the left, but because you're so steadfast in your focusing right in front of you, that you don't see, if you was to just veer off with the path that you're on, you could get where you want much faster. And again, it's something I'm guilty of. There's times when I've lost focus, there's times where I've held my focus too much. It's a learning curve of life. Nobody's perfect. But if you follow people, or if you believe that people are perfect and everything comes easy, you're always going to be waiting for it to come easy for you, and you're not going to be willing to take that action. So step out of your bubble and do something. Like, it is your life. It's only going to be the be all and end all to you. So if you're not willing to take the action, what's ever going to change? You're hoping that the tide of life or somebody else's actions are going to get your life to where it wants to be. Well, no wonder you are unhappy. You have no certainty in life because you have no control. You have no sentience over your own life. The bubble is good. The bubble is bad. But really and truly, the bubble is inanimate. It comes down to you. Do you have the tools to step in and out? Do you have the awareness to step in and out? Like, it is your life. So don't blame any aspect of it. Take responsibility. It's all aspects of life. But inevitably it's your life. So it's all going to come down to you no matter what it is. Whether it's stepping out of the bubble or stepping out of your comfort zone. It comes down to you to knock that first domino down. And after you do, it becomes easier. Like, if you're socially awkward, that first conversation with a stranger is gonna feel absolutely monumental. But once you've done it and you take that pressure off, that second conversation gets a bit easier. The third, even easier. And so on and so forth until slowly over time, you're not as socially awkward as you was. Again, it's not to say you get perfect and you're going to be a life at a party, but you'll be better than where you started at. But you have to take the action. And that is true in so many instances in life. Now, it's down to you to put in that action. I think I'm going to wrap the episode up there. I did have a seed a second ago and I saved it because it was like a little train of thought in my head and I was like, yeah, save that for the end. But then I lost it. So what are we going to say for this week? The seed. A simple idea to sit with and see if it grows. Ask yourself, how much are you living for others? How much are you living for others' approval, others' acceptance, others' gratification or acknowledgement? And how much are you living for you? Because when all is said and done, you're here to be you. So if you're not living life to be the best you, you're not living life true to you either. So take some time and ask yourself, are you living for you or are you living for others? And if so, why? Answer it on both ends of the scale. Like, it's never going to be a bad thing to ask yourself the questions. Let yourself sit with the thoughts and see what comes of it. Don't be afraid of the silence. Like, we're so caught up in this entertainment-filled world that we seem to have become allergic to silence. But the things that we find uncomfortable are the things that will help us to grow. So if you find sitting in the silence uncomfortable, there may be some things that you need to listen to from yourself. So sit in that silence. Listen to the uncomfortable things. And then take action on them. Because even if you're in that pit of despair, if you're willing to take action, there's a glimmer of hope. All the best. I'll catch you on the next one.